Have you ever noticed that after a breakup or a betrayal, fall in love suddenly loses its romance and starts to sound dangerous? What once made your heart race now looks more like a temporary trance, a story you told yourself about someone, more than it ever was about who they really are. Maybe love hasn't disappeared. Maybe it's just that the fog around it is finally starting to clear. Jung said, "Love, very often, is only the illusion of seeing ourselves as whole in another person. Before awakening, we throw ourselves into a glance, a smile, a strange sense of, 'It feels like I've known you forever,' and rush to call it destiny. In truth, we don't love the other as they are. We love the feeling that, finally, someone has come to fill the emptiness inside me." So, is the love you're in now truly love, or just a fear of loneliness wrapped in romantic language? Is that person really that special, or just the perfect screen for the unconscious projections Jung warned us about? In the next part, we'll walk straight into the territory most love stories avoid. Why what you call the love of your life might be nothing more than your unconscious crying for help, and why seeing that is both painful and the only doorway to a kind of love that no longer demands you pay with your own self. Part 1. Before Awakening, Loving as Lack. 1. Falling in love as an act of escape. Falling in love sounds poetic, but through Jung's eyes, it looks more like an escape than a miracle. We rarely step into love consciously. Most of the time, we dive into it the way someone jumps into water just to drown out the noise in their own head. Notice this. The times you loved like never before often showed up right when you were most exhausted with yourself. A stretch of stalled work, a sense of meaninglessness, a loneliness you can't explain, and then suddenly someone appears, sends a few texts, pays a few compliments, posts a few stories. Your heart trembles. The sky seems brighter again. You call it fate, but if you're honest, it looks more like a psychological lifebuoy. Finally, something that keeps you from having to face yourself. Jung once pointed out, people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls. Those empty spaces, those questions, who am I? What do I want? Why does life feel so meaningless? Is deeply uncomfortable. Because we don't know how to stay with those questions, we look for an exit. Love, or more precisely the feeling of being chosen by someone, becomes an instant painkiller. Instead of sitting with our anxiety, we plunge into texting, calling, dreaming about the future, imagining every handhold, every afternoon walk together. Just like that, our loneliness is covered over with a coat of pink paint. Falling in love is a very accurate phrase, because the gravity doesn't come from the other person, it comes from the lack inside us. We don't fall because of them, we fall because we can't bear ourselves. When you say, "I don't even know why I got tangled up with him, he's not that special," that's your unconscious showing its face. He doesn't have to be extraordinary. What he has is the right frequency for the emptiness in you. All he has to do is give you the feeling of being needed, and your brain grabs on, like a child clutching the first hand that reaches out in the dark. From a psychological perspective, loving this way isn't very different from an avoidance mechanism. Instead of sitting with feelings of emptiness, anxiety, and meaninglessness, we use the stimulation of a new romance to distract ourselves. The dopamine from messages, compliments, and fantasies of a shared future all work like a chain of tiny rewards that help us temporarily forget the core question. If this person weren't here, could I stand being with myself? Most of us don't want to answer that, so we keep falling in love over and over, like an addict getting high again, so they don't have to feel how tired their own body really is. Think of a friend you know, or yourself, who simply can't be alone for too long, just broke up, and they accidentally develop feelings for someone new. They feel lonely for a short while and go back to an ex, even knowing the relationship is broken. On the surface, it's, "My heart just loves. What can I do?" Deeper down, it's this: the feeling of being chosen, being needed, getting a "Have you slept yet?" text becomes temporary proof that I'm not invisible, I matter. So we keep loving, but it's the love of someone running away. More subtly, society even legitimizes this escape. Movies, music, romance novels glorify a kind of love with all your mind. Love till death. The more dependent, the more painful, the harder to let go, the more we call it real love. Jung didn't look at these stories with romantic eyes, but with the eyes of someone observing the collective unconscious. He saw in them a reminder that many people use love as a way to avoid looking at the emptiness of their inner lives. Instead of asking, "What values am I living by? Who am I outside of my roles?" it's much more comfortable to ask, "Does he love me? Did she text back?" Some love stories begin from a tiny detail, then get inflated to fill an entire inner universe. Someone simply listens to you talk about your family, and you instantly read an entire history into it. Finally, someone understands me. In truth, they may just be being polite. But because you've never truly been listened to since childhood, that shard of lack clings tightly to anyone who offers you a little warmth. You're not just running from your current loneliness. You're also running from old pain by throwing yourself at someone new and calling it love. On a deeper level, falling in love also helps us escape responsibility for our own lives. When we believe our happiness depends on meeting the right person, we don't have to face the work of building a meaningful life ourselves. If I'm bored, I can say, "Because I haven't met the right one." If I feel lost, I can hope, when I have a family, it'll be different. The other becomes a salvation project, a reason to delay facing the question, "If I never had a lover, what would I do with my life?" Jung is not against love. He only warns. When love becomes an excuse not to grow up, it has already been hijacked by the unconscious. We think we're looking for someone to walk with, but in truth, we're looking for a place to hide from our own maturation. That's why so many relationships crack when one person starts to change, to grow, to become more conscious. Because the relationship was built on the need to hide from each other, not on two people willing to face life side by side. Try looking back at those times you were drunk on someone to the point of losing your mind. If you strip away all the romantic lines, what's left? Fear of being abandoned, fear of not being enough, fear of being alone with the noises inside your chest. These fears pull you toward the other faster than any destiny ever could. If you realize you once loved this way, share a little piece of your story in the comments. That's how you start naming and being honest with yourself. This doesn't mean all love is an escape, but if you're honest, you'll see. Before awakening, most of the times you fell in love came with something inside you that you were trying to avoid. Love then wasn't a meeting between two whole people. It was a temporary handshake between two souls looking for a place to hide. Only when we recognize this do we have a chance to move to another level of understanding love. But to get there, we first have to dare to look straight at an uncomfortable truth. There's a good chance that in all those times you proudly said you had loved with all you had, Jung would quietly ask a different question. Did you really love, or did you just run very fast from yourself and call that run love? 2. The mechanism of projection. We've been talking about falling in love as a way of running from ourselves. But how do we run? Emotion alone isn't enough. There has to be a far more subtle inner mechanism that turns an entirely ordinary person into destiny. That's when the unconscious mechanism of projection starts to operate. Carl Jung called projection the act of unconsciously throwing our inner contents out onto the outer world, then treating them as if they were objective reality. He said, projections change the world into a replica of one's own unknown face. This is why two people can meet the same person and feel completely different about them. One sees warm and deep, the other sees cold and distant. The truth is, no one is actually seeing that person as they really are. Each is only seeing their own projection. In love, this becomes extremely powerful. When you are lacking, lonely, and emotionally immature, anyone who touches the right lack inside you can become a savior in your eyes. They don't have to do anything extraordinary, but your unconscious immediately paints over them. She's nothing like anyone I've ever met. This person was born for me. Yet if you went back and replayed what they actually said and did, you'd see much of it could be totally ordinary, even vague. Projection is especially dangerous because it's so convincing. You don't feel like you're imagining. You don't say, "I'm starving for love, so I think he really cares about me." You state, "He cares about me so much." You don't say, "I'm scared of being abandoned, so I cling." You say, "We have a special connection, I can feel it." That feeling of "I'm sure" is itself evidence that projection is working hard. The less awareness, the less self-questioning, the more room projection has to grow. Think back on a relationship where later you had to ask yourself, what was I thinking when I loved that person? Back then, what made you so sure they were deep, mature, different? Were they truly like that? Or did you simply need them to be that way, so you chose to believe it? In love, it's not just the ugly parts that get projected, but also the beautiful parts. We project onto the other the tenderness we lack, the strength we haven't dared to live, the wisdom we haven't dared to tap into. Instead of saying, "I want to become someone who understands me, loves me, protects me," we just say, "He will do that." It sounds much easier. The unconscious escapes the responsibility of growing up by placing that task onto someone else and calling them love. The interesting thing is that projection doesn't just create an idealized image of the other, it secretly defines your role as well. If you project onto them the image of the strong, grounded one who always rescues me from every mess, you instantly shapeshift into the weak, fragile one who needs protection. You start acting like that, speaking like that, choosing like that, and the unconscious reinforces that role deeper and deeper. In the end, you're no longer two people, but two characters in a script you wrote without knowing it. In Jung's eyes, most love drama doesn't happen between two mature adults, but between projections. The abandoned child inside you arguing with the betrayer mask you've placed on the other. Your invisible fear demanding that they prove the opposite. Your need for control masquerading as, "I'm just worried about you." It all spins in the unconscious, and we call it a deep, complicated love. Projection makes pre-awakening love both intoxicating and blind. This mechanism will keep repeating with different faces until you notice that the common denominator isn't "they were all terrible," but that the film reel inside you has never changed. On the path of awakening, Jung describes one of the most important turning points as when we dare to call these projections back, to see the other as they are. A limited, contradictory human being, sometimes deep, sometimes shallow, partly compatible with us, and partly not. And more brutally, to see ourselves as we are, not as the character we like playing in our love stories. But that is the story of a later part. For now, in this stage before awakening, projection is still doing exactly what it does best, giving us the illusion that we've found the other half, when in reality, all we've found is a mirror reflecting what inside us has never truly been faced. Part 2. The moment of awakening. Awakening doesn't arrive with soft music and warm golden light. It comes with the sense that everything suddenly turns flat and washed out. The lines that once moved you to tears now sound like memorized dialogue. The gestures that once made you believe no one has ever loved me like this now reveal their clumsiness, their limits, even their selfishness. You realize you've been reading far too much meaning into very ordinary actions. Yesterday, he cares about every little detail. Today, you suddenly see he's simply someone who likes to control. Yesterday, she's deep and empathetic. Today, you realize she's just often sad and in need of a crutch. The colored lens over your eyes cracks, and the world is no longer shimmering. At that moment, Jung calls the beginning of projections the withdrawal. The first feeling is not relief, but panic. It's like you're in the middle of a movie theater when the screen suddenly goes black and the lights snap on. You're no longer immersed in the story, but realize you're just sitting on a chair in an ordinary room, surrounded by strangers. When the backdrop falls, the person you love no longer appears as destiny, but as a normal human being. Sometimes cowardly, sometimes selfish, limited, carrying their own wounds. If you're honest, you'll notice a part of you wanting to yank that backdrop back up immediately to return to the old film. But once you've seen the crack, it's very hard to pretend it was never there. If you've ever had a lights-on moment like that, try writing a little about it below. Who it was, what you realized, and how from that day on, you never looked at love the same way again. You don't have to tell the whole story, just a short piece, but enough that when you read it back, you know. In that moment, you stopped turning away from the truth. Psychology calls this the moment of disillusionment, but for Jung, it is also a spiritual turning point, because it's not only the image of the other that collapses, the entire structure of your ego within that relationship shakes. You don't just lose the ideal lover, you also lose the roles of the chosen one, the special one. When the other is no longer the hero, you are no longer the main character in that beautiful story either. And for the ego, losing the role sometimes hurts more than losing the person. The natural reaction is denial. People tell themselves, everyone has flaws, I have to accept them. But in truth, they're not learning to love what's real. They're trying to tape the ideal backdrop back together. They compromise. As long as he stays, it's okay. As long as she still loves me. They agree to keep living inside the play, so long as they don't have to face the fact that the love they worshipped all this time has been built largely out of their own illusions. Jung says, this is when the ego fights against awakening, because seeing the truth means you have to take responsibility for your projections and can no longer blame fate or the other person. But if you don't go back to sleep, if you let the light stay on, what happens then? After the initial waves of panic and anger, there is usually a huge space. You feel lost inside the very relationship you once called home. You sit beside this person, but the sense of familiarity has evaporated. The story you used to tell each other suddenly feels stale. Every attempt to rekindle the love starts to look like trying to rescue a stage whose floorboards have already rotted. That emptiness makes many people think, I must be out of love. But if you look more closely, you'll see this is not the death of love. It's the death of projection. Jung often emphasized, when projections dissolve, we have for the first time the chance to see the other as an independent being, no longer just a mirror of ourselves. This is both liberating and frightening. Liberating because you no longer have to strain to protect a perfect picture. Frightening because you realize this person can leave at any time. They were not born to heal you. They have their own world, their own pain, their own path. Many people can't bear this truth. They'd rather cling to the idea of bound destiny than accept two separate beings who may walk together today and part ways tomorrow. In the moment of awakening, a very different question begins to arise. If this person is no longer my savior, then why am I here? This question strikes directly at the foundation of the relationship. You realize that many things you called sacrifice, unconditional giving, were actually a kind of unconscious bargain. I give you everything. You must prove that I'm worthy of love. When you see this contract, there are two possibilities. You feel ashamed and want to run from yourself, or you sit down and adjust the way you love. But whichever you choose, you can't go back to loving the way you did before, because now you know. The moment the stage curtain falls is also the moment you realize you no longer know who you are in this story. If you're no longer someone's ideal lover, no longer a half, no longer the chosen one, then who are you? This question hurts more than the breakup itself. And this is the crossroads. Either you rush to find someone new, or you stay in that dim space and look closely at your own face without makeup. The second path is the real path of awakening, but it is also much lonelier and slower than diving into a new love to prove you're still desirable. The most important thing in this moment is to understand. You're not stupid for having projected. You simply did what the human psyche naturally does when it isn't conscious enough. Jung doesn't condemn projection. He sees it as a necessary phase. The mistake only begins when you are seen and still choose to close your eyes. Accepting this doesn't destroy love. It only destroys illusion. From here, the story moves into a different landscape. You will have to learn how to stand steady before the truth that no one was born to save you. And precisely in that raw emptiness, another way of loving can begin to take shape. No longer grounded in projection and escape, but in two people learning to look at each other with eyes no longer covered by so many colored lenses. Part 3. The Desert of the Soul, Loneliness and the process of individuation. When the curtain of illusion falls, it's not just the love story that changes. Your entire inner world shifts tone. And this is when a new chapter opens. The journey of you alone, walking through what Jung, in many images, called the desert of the soul. At first, this desert takes on a very familiar shape. The days you wake up with no good morning text, the weekend nights that suddenly stretch long because there's no one left to tell your stories to. The tiny habits that used to spin around one person, now hanging in the air with nowhere to land. But if it stops at missing your ex, this is not yet the desert. The real desert begins when you realize, even if they came back, even if someone new appeared, the space in your chest would still be there. Loneliness now no longer wears the face of one specific person. It turns into a vast, almost frightening inner expanse. Jung called individuation the journey of becoming oneself. But it sounds like a beautiful quote until you brush against it with your own skin. In reality, it feels like being torn away from everything that once gave you a sense of who I am. You are no longer someone's other half, someone's lover. You are just me. But who is this me beyond all those labels? Not many people are willing to stay with that question long enough, because the moment you truly ask it, everything else starts to feel strangely dull. From a psychological point of view, this is the phase where libido, your life energy, starts withdrawing from external objects it used to cling to and turns inward. You no longer have much appetite for chasing emotional highs. No longer feel thrilled at throwing yourself into a new crush just to prove you're still worth something. You grow tired of half-hearted conversations and makeshift relationships that only serve to fill time. Others may look at you and say, "You've become so distant, so cold," but they have no idea that inside, you're walking through a vast territory you've never stepped into before. This desert comes with a very different kind of loneliness. It's not the feeling of being abandoned, not the sense of no one loves me. It's like the first time you turn off all noise, put your phone down, stop looking for someone to distract you, and sit still on your bed in a dark room. At first, your mind will try everything to escape. Put on music, scroll, text someone, anyone. But if you hold the silence long enough, other sounds start to rise. You begin walking through rooms you've always kept locked. A forgotten memory returns so vividly, you can almost smell the air of that day. A family member's old sentence, "You never do anything right," suddenly echoes in the middle of the night. The face of your younger self, crying with no one to comfort you, appears like a quiet ghost. You realize it wasn't your most recent lover who hurt you that much, but a long line of times you weren't seen, weren't chosen, weren't held, all queuing up inside. Jung said the self, the totality within us, only truly emerges when persona and shadow begin to stand side by side in our awareness. The desert is where those two parts meet. You see yourself not only as the good one, the one who sacrifices, but also as someone selfish, afraid, controlling, and dependent. You see that you both want to be loved and are willing to suffocate the one you love out of fear of being left. You no longer have the strength to tell only half the story about yourself. And although that makes you ashamed, disappointed, even self-hating, this is exactly the first step of individuation. Daring to see the whole of who you are, without picking and choosing, without Photoshop. During this stage, many people fall into a strange feeling of not belonging. You sit among friends as they talk about crushes, drama, breakups and makeups, and it's as if you're watching an old movie. You understand those emotions because you've lived them, but something in you has stepped out of the game. You no longer feel excited hearing, "Just love, don't overthink," because you know that very "don't think" is what pulled you into so many plays. You're not good at joining conversations that complain, "Men are all the same, women are all the same," because at a deeper level, you see the problem lies in all the unexamined content inside each person. This understanding doesn't make you feel superior, it just makes you feel more alone. Of course, this process is anything but poetic. There will be days you crave a pair of arms so badly you tremble, then realize you can't go back to half-hearted relationships just to ease your loneliness. There will be nights you open old conversations, your thumb hovering over "send message," then stopping because you know that if you send it, you are betraying the truth you've already seen. In others' eyes, this looks like coldness. But to the soul, it is a new kind of loyalty. Loyalty to the path you're on, to the new seeing that has just begun to form. Individuation doesn't require you to leave the world, but it does force you to leave behind illusions that once worked like anesthetics. It doesn't tell you, "Never love again." It tells you to pause using love as a reason not to face yourself. In the desert, you learn to embrace the parts you once threw onto others, to comfort yourself instead of waiting to be soothed, to protect your own boundaries instead of blaming others when they cross them, to ask, "What do I need?" instead of hoping someone will automatically know. These are tiny steps, but each time you manage one, a bit of power is handed back from others into your own hands. And then, at some point on the journey, you'll notice something strange. Being alone is no longer a punishment. It becomes a natural state. You can still feel sad, still sometimes wish someone were there. But the panic is gone. That is the sign that the desert has begun to turn into a kind of private sanctuary, where you finally meet yourself without needing any great love as an intermediary. If you're still here, listening up to this point, thank you for daring to stay with yourself this long. Not everyone dares to look into that hollow space in their chest without rushing to find someone new to plug it. If you want to keep walking with us to the end of this journey, where we'll talk about a different kind of love that comes after you've met yourself again, stay, don't click away yet. And if you feel that what you've just heard sounds like someone finally saying out loud what you've never dared to name, please hit like and subscribe to the channel so that each time you're about to run away from yourself, we can still meet again here. Part 4. Love After Awakening. So if we still love, what does that love look like? When someone no longer agrees to fall blindly, how do they love? This is where fall in love gives way to something more mature. Stand in love. Fall in love is the image of a fall, of losing your center, of being swept away from yourself. Stand in love is a completely different posture. You step into love standing upright on your own 2 feet. You don't dissolve into the other, don't melt yourself down just to fit their shape. You stand there with your own history, values, limits, and inner life. And from a place where there is already a clear I, you reach out your hand and say, "I want to walk with you." Jung once said that true maturity is not dissolving into another, but standing firm as an individual while still being able to connect deeply. Stand in love is exactly that state, not hiding inside each other, but standing side by side, just as Jung wrote, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed." In this kind of love, the sentence, "You are my everything," suddenly sounds off. The awakened one understands that if they turn the other into everything, they are once again placing their entire psychic life into the hands of another limited human being. Instead, the sentence inside them sounds more like, "You are not everything, but you are a part of my life that I cherish and choose to keep." That hands freedom back to love. Love is no longer a contract guaranteeing absolute safety, but a shared space where two people can both live, take care of themselves, and be responsible for their own lives. One very clear sign of stand in love is the absence of games. The awakened person is no longer interested in going silent to test the other's feelings, posting ambiguous statuses to provoke jealousy, disappearing for days, and then coming back to measure how tightly the other clings. They understand that every time they do that, they are turning both themselves and the other into objects to be manipulated, rather than two human beings to be respected. They choose to speak plainly instead. "This bothers me. This doesn't feel right to me. I need space. I need time." Hidden inside these simple statements is something that used to be very rare: taking responsibility for their own emotions. A girl once left her story on our channel. After we gave each other some time to reflect and then return to the relationship, I realized everything was no longer the same. In the past, being angry meant going silent, fighting intensely, and criticizing each other. Now it's different. I still get upset, but instead of throwing all the blame at him, I choose to say, "When that happened, I felt disrespected." He also no longer reacts by attacking me. He sighs and says, "I hear you, but I can feel that I'm still defensive inside. I probably need a bit more time to understand why." Suddenly, I realized we no longer used arguments to see who would win, who would lose, who would back down first. The air was still tense, but it no longer felt like a battlefield. It was more like a slightly cramped room where the two of us were forced to look at, what are we doing to each other, and what are we doing to ourselves? Looking back now, I understand that that was when both our nervous systems had become less addicted to drama, and we had started learning something much harder, enduring the discomfort of speaking honestly and truly listening. In Stand in Love, personal boundaries are not a threat. They are the condition that keeps love from becoming devouring. An awakened person can love deeply, but they will not easily ignore the feeling of being crossed just to keep the peace. They are willing to say no, even when they're afraid of losing the other. They can say, "I love you, but I don't accept the way you speak to me when you're angry," or "I really value you, but I don't agree with this style of control." In the past, such sentences might have made them panic about losing them. Now, these truths matter more than that fear, because they know that if love can only exist when they stay silent about what hurts them, that isn't love, it's a contract of endurance. Another characteristic of love after awakening is that the two no longer need to cling tightly to prove they love each other. Before, distance meant risking losing them. Now, distance is the space for each person to keep growing, to continue living their own life. They still go out with friends, still pursue their passions, still invest in other relationships, not because they lack affection, but because they understand that a single romantic bond cannot carry the entire meaning of a human life. As Jung would say, their life energy has been distributed more diversely into creativity, meaningful work, and connection with self, rather than being poured entirely into one object. This kind of love also looks straight at impermanence. There are no more forever vows just to reassure each other. They know people change, circumstances change, life paths can diverge, and they know that doesn't make today's love any less real. So instead of obsessing over, how long will we be together, they care more about the question, while we're still walking together, how are we treating each other? The awakened one accepts that no one can hold the future, so they are all the more conscious about being clean, kind, and honest in each day they still have together. That doesn't make post-awakening love any less painful. It can still make your chest tighten when the other speaks carelessly. It can still make you sad when you have to part ways because your paths no longer align. The difference is this: the pain no longer drags self-destruction along with it. You no longer collapse to the point of forgetting who you are. You can sit there crying, hurting bit by bit, but underneath there is a foundation whispering, "I will not lose myself again." Perhaps the most beautiful thing about Stand in Love is the freedom it offers both sides. You don't need the other to breathe, so you don't need to lock them up to feel safe. You can truly say, "I want you to be happy, even if at some point that no longer means being with me," not as some lofty movie line, but as something you can genuinely bear. You know that if one day you must part, you will hurt, but you won't turn yourself into wreckage to force them to stay out of guilt. And precisely because of that, if they choose to stay, their presence has a different quality. It's no longer penance, no longer fear of your collapse, but a decision made in freedom. Love after awakening might look like ordinary evenings, awkward but honest conversations, tiny adjustments so you both can breathe a bit easier. To an ego still addicted to intensity, all this seems boring. But to a soul exhausted by loves that always end in ruins, this is the only thing strong enough to sustain it in the long run. A love that doesn't make you fall, but keeps you standing firmly beside another without dissolving. At this point, you can probably see why the awakened are no longer easily swept off their feet, no longer easily love as if it were the last time they could ever love. It's not because they've gone numb, but because they have changed their understanding of love. They no longer demand that love must burn wildly to feel real. They choose a kind of feeling that can walk with them through ordinary days, through silence, through difference. And only when they stop falling into love like a blind plunge do they finally become capable of standing in love, with eyes wide open and a heart that no longer has to pay with its own inner freedom. By now, you may have realized that the original question, "Why do the awakened no longer fall in love?" was flawed from the start. It's not that they've lost the ability to love, but that they are no longer willing to use love as a blanket to cover the cracks inside. When the fog lifts, love has nowhere left to hide. Either it returns to its true shape, or it leaves. And between those two possibilities, the thing that truly changes is your gaze. From looking for someone to save you, to learning how to walk beside someone without abandoning yourself. Jung doesn't take away your romance. He only takes away your illusions to see if you're brave enough to keep what remains. You may love fewer times, with less noise, but each time you choose to step in, it is a conscious decision, not an unconscious fall. And if one day you find yourself standing in front of a relationship in which you don't have to shrink, don't have to perform, don't have to beg to stay, then that is very likely not just love for the other person, but proof that at last you have stopped turning your back on yourself.